Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today, a special convention show. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. We got Ryan Grimm on. He's actually got some new reporting about the way that the Massachusetts Democrats tried to cover their tracks after being involved in the smear campaign against Alex Moore, so he's going to break that down. They also had a debate last night that he watched as much as he could anyway, so we'll get into that as well. We have Keith Ellison on. He's Attorney General of Minnesota. We'll get an update on what is going on the ground there and also how he views, as a former Bernie supporter, sort of the future of the Democratic Party, the role of the left under a potential Biden administration. But we wanted to start with that DNC last night. It was a night to remember, a very pandemic special.
There's a whole lot of cringe going around for anybody who wants. The least cringe moment was probably Michelle Obama. She was the headline speaker of the night in, a relatively fine speech. We have a bit of a snippet from there. Let's take a listen.
So let me be as honest and clear as I possibly can. Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us.
I thought it was right. It was fine. It was decently effective. I don't think that she really broke any new ground. It wasn't really anything different than what you've been hearing for 4 years about Donald Trump. But she's an incredibly skilled person. And especially after the night of multiple hours of very painful and cringeworthy content of I was very sort of, look, let me be fair, it's a hard thing to pull off, and I think they tried to make it a little too literally of a convention when, look, people put on programming all the time that people actually want to watch and doesn't make them want to kill themselves, but it was a hard thing to do.
Yes.
It was not done all that well, and so by the time you got to Michelle Obama, the fact that it wasn't so painful really did feel like a bit of a relief.
Michelle Obama is one of the most beloved women in America. She's got the podcast, the Netflix, Becoming, stadium tour. She's basically a celebrity. She spoke well. That's all you need to do. But as we'll cover later in the show, MSNBC and CNN were oh my God, it's the greatest since Ronald Reagan, which it's Paul Begala citing...
guys. It was fine.
Okay, there's a lot to say there.
Basically, let's talk about the substance. I mean, the theme of the night, so they brought in all these Republicans. Yes. They brought in John Kasich and Meg Whitman and Christine Todd Whitman, and they brought in a whole slew of Republicans. They also had Bernie Sanders on there so that they could make the case that, this is the Biden coalition. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, it was tailor-made of a night to make people who have my politics just super depressed because it was very substance-free.
Yes.
There was no real policy discussed, as was the case with Hillary in 2016. They're all in on Trump is bad with, in much smaller letters down below, and Biden's a little better. Biden's fine. Biden's fine. Michelle talked about their personal connection, the way she saw him in the Oval Office. Bernie Sanders talked about much of the speech was similar, here's why the stakes are existential. And I think that is the best pitch if you were a Bernie supporter of why you would vote for Joe Biden. And he goes on to say, look, Biden's not everything I'd want him to be, but here are some things where he may make some progress. But overall, look, it's all in on the Trump is bad messaging that Democrats have been all in on for 4 years with very little affirmative vision, and that's basically what we're getting.
That was highlighted in my favorite speech of the night from former Ohio Governor John Kasich, who literally stood at a fork in the road, or whatever you want to call it. Let's just watch whatever the hell that was.
I'm sure there are Republicans and independents who couldn't imagine crossing over to support a Democrat. They fear Joe may turn sharp left and leave them behind. I don't believe that because I know the measure of the man. It's reasonable, faithful, respectful. And no one pushes Joe around.
No one pushes Joe around. So for anyone who got your hopes up that maybe he might move a little bit, to the left, maybe embrace things like healthcare for all or any of those crazy ideas that we're into, John Kasich is there to
isn't
assure
that
you.
amazing?
Don't worry, guys. He's going to be on our team.
They basically trotted out John Kasich to be if for all those people who worry he's going to go to the left, he's not. And so you basically are nuking any of the real progressive case for Biden. Right. So all of the way people are Bernie and his campaign manager, many of those people have been on this show, are he could be the most progressive president since FDR. And they are trotting out John Kasich to assure, and if you think that speech wasn't pre-approved, 100% by the Biden
course.
campaign.
Yes.
It was. Everything was pre-recorded. He's going out there to be like, no, he's not going to do that. I mean, believe people when they tell you something, right?
Yes.
Believe them.
John Kasich is way more right about Joe Biden than certainly Donald Trump has been.
Right,
I mean, he's right. He's not going to go radical left. If you are a John Kasich type Republican, all 5 of you should feel very comfortable.
Right. You're
in
good.
the Joe Biden administration. Right. And so, it kind of went against some of the messaging of the Bernie speech, which was like, hey, progressives, here's some things you're going to get. You're going to get some things on childcare. You're going to get some progress on health care. But I was glad to see that Bernie did not. I was really, really dreading seeing that line in there about Biden could be the most progressive president since FDR, because we've heard that line a few times already. Right. Thankfully, that was not in the speech. I would say overall, Bernie's speech was fairly realistic in terms of what Joe Biden could actually offer. And he was, at least from what I saw, and I watched or read the transcripts of, most of the night, it was actually the only really policy-centric
that's right. It actually was.
part, which makes sense because Bernie's supporters actually cared about the policy. That's why they were behind him, is because they cared about healthcare, because they cared about the environment. And that was a relatively, small section of Bernie's speech. Most of what he talked about was also the existential threat of a Trump presidency, of a Trump reelect. Let's take a listen to Bernie.
Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Trump golfs. His actions fanned this pandemic, resulting in over 170,000 deaths and a nation still unprepared to protect its people.
What do you think of that, Saagar?
Yeah, I mean, what is he, an MSNBC Rachel Maddow viewer, like the golf thing? And I'm not defending the golf. It's obviously stupid and bad. But I've never seen him give speeches like that.
Well,
we covered his whole campaign, and it was like, he never. He would do the most dangerous president, which is really dumb. If we lived through the George W. Bush presidency,
right?
And I always, that was always very incongruent with the rest of his messaging. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't seem like it should be coming out of his mouth. This very much like Trump golf message geared towards the suburban wine moms who despise him anyway. I just really don't understand it. It's kind of a sad way to go out. It could be his very last convention. Who knows?
I guess I see it a little bit differently, which is obviously I agree that Democrats and Bernie have kind of lost their mind in the Trump era. But Democrats in particular, they've erased all of history. They've erased the George W. Bush era. They've lionized, people like John Kasich now are apparently heroes. But I think it's the only case you can really make. You can't make an affirmative case for Biden if you're on the left of the party, if you're someone who supported Bernie Sanders. And so I actually think now, at least they've put Russiagate aside, right? I mean, that would have been catastrophic.
Yes.
And if this had happened before the pandemic, it would have been the Russiagate convention. It would have been out of everybody's mouths.
Impeachment convention.
Right? I mean, we've got Sally Yates on tonight, so don't worry. They'll still get it in there. But they are making a much more effective case against Trump than Trump is making against Biden.
I agree.
And so I think look, neither Trump or Biden is exciting at this point in terms of what they're going to offer the country. Neither one of them can really claim to be a change candidate, which is what people would actually affirmatively want. And so I think the reason why Biden is still up in the polls is because they have finally marshaled what is an effective case against Donald Trump because of his own manifest failings during the pandemic and with the economic response and all of that. So the case against Trump that they made last night, I think, was often awkwardly delivered and painful. But I do think it's at least the right case. Whereas Trump, as we're going to cover later in the show, is still on this, he's a radical Marxist Trojan horse for socialism, et cetera. So he's not making an affirmative case, and he's making the wrong negative case against Biden.
He's making the wrong negative case against Biden, which we outline. I'll definitely outline. It's not difficult. Trojan horse for globalism, not for socialism. But you see, basically what's happening here in terms of the way that they're prosecuting that case, which is it can work, but at the same time, cases are low right now. Cases are nearing an all-time low in terms of our daily caseload. Deaths in the same thing. And this is what we said, I think, months ago, which is it's a very risky case to make.
It is.
Which is that come November, the political landscape may be very different than what it is. Now, who knows? It could get cold. Virus could resurge. School could, trigger a mass pandemic all over again. I'm not going to discount any of that. And I think that much of the handling in the early days was horrific, bad, and the economic response has been catastrophic. However, discounting all of that, it's still tight. What did we cover just yesterday? Battleground polls, basically virtually tied. I mean, how do you do that if you're Joe Biden? I don't know. It's kind of amazing.
Every metric is a disaster for Trump.
Yeah.
Like where the economy is, the handling of the pandemic, the wrong track numbers, his handling of the protests. I mean, you look at all of these and you're like, this guy should be getting crushed by 20 points. We should be headed to like epic electoral landslide. And yet, overall polls show it tightening a bit. And this CNN poll that we covered yesterday actually shows it statistically tied in the battleground states. So, Democrats are counting on everything to go wrong for Trump and for the country between now and November. That's what they're counting on.
Yeah, which I think is sad. It's very sad.
It is sad, and it may, right? Trump is not really doing anything to prevent that from occurring. But you wouldn't want to bet on that. And so that's why, again, on the substance, you would want to see an affirmative positive case. Now, look, they've got 3 more days left. Is that right? There's 4 days, 3 more days left. It's going to be a long week.
Buckle up.
And so maybe they'll get to that point. I'm sure they will talk more about that. But it's clear that they've centered their message around Trump is bad. This is existential. You have no choice but to suck it up and vote Joe, which has been the message to their credit.
Yeah.
They landed on that message right from the beginning.
And whenever they deviate from that message, things get real cringe real quick. So Amy Klobuchar debuted again last night. Forgot how much we love her on the national stage. Let's remember.
You know, the president may hate the post office, but he's still going to have to send them a change of address card come January.
And if you hated that.
As a mother, I object to that kind of intense mom energy.
And if you hated that, what we're about to show you was way, way worse. This actually played last night. It's not a joke. It's not a parody. Let's take a listen.
Good night.
There's something happening here, but it ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun.
I have no words. No words for that. Friend of the show, Kyle Kulinski tweeted, "This is the moment when Trump won re-election."
I'll tell you what, I watched that. Put some bleach on my eyes.
I sent it to you this morning. I can't imagine what your reaction was.
Oh, man. It was bad.
I showed my husband, and he was like, there's no way this really happened. This is a real thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Look.
Congrats, Dems.
Last thought on this. For the future, for anyone who wants to listen to any sort of advice. If you're taking an in-person event and you're making it virtual, don't make it so literal.
Yes, I agree.
And that was what was so painful about it, was this trying to capture the same exact elements that a convention would have, but in this awkward public accessy format. I feel like the Democratic Party has anyone in Hollywood, anyone in television production, people who actually create content all the time that people affirmatively want to watch and don't want to slit their wrists while doing so. Reimagine it as, tell a story. Don't do it the same way. Don't try to be okay, we do these speeches and then we have these interstitials and then we sing these songs. You have to reimagine it all together rather than making it such a literal replication. And by the way, look, we're, being a little harsh with the Democrats right now. I am sure the Republican convention is going to be at least as bad. So wait for that. But that would be, in general, my thoughts about pandemic era conventions and live events.
A lot of thoughts on that. And just, one last thing, which is that their story that they had to tell was this thing sucks. It's weird talking like this. We have to do so because we're in the middle of the pandemic, and if you elect us, we won't be in a pandemic anymore. Instead of trying to manufacture this whole weird, whatever the hell that Billy Porter thing was, and Klobuchar, and all that pretending that things are normal, that's probably the easiest case you could have made. But alas, they didn't.
All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.